new gardener, it kind of intimidated me to grow a lot of root crops, but especially potatoes. And it took me years to finally start growing potatoes, which is crazy because they are so easy to grow. So today we are going to dig into growing potatoes. We're going to talk about what kind of seed potatoes to get and what kind of containers you can plant them in, how to plant them. And if you missed last week's video, we went even more in depth about potato varieties. But this week we're going to show you how to get these guys planted. And believe me, it's so easy. If you're not growing potatoes yet, you should be. So here's how to do it. Hey everyone, I'm Kaylee with Rooted Revival, and this week we are talking about potatoes. So we actually talked about potatoes last week as well, where we broke down the difference between determinate and indeterminate potatoes and why it makes a difference in the way that we plant them. So this week we are going to actually dig into planting our potatoes. So we're going to talk about everything that you need to know to get them planted, different types of containers, how to get them started, how to get them sprouted. All of that is going to be covered in this week's video. So if you missed last week's, I'll go ahead and add it right up here. Otherwise, let's get started. So when we're planting potatoes, it's most ideal to use a seed potato. And now, that's not a seed. I know we commonly think of seeds, little itty bitty seeds, but when it comes to potatoes, this is actually a seed potato. They are usually sold in bags like this. And what's cool about seed potatoes is that they're grown exclusively to be planted. So the difference between that and what we get at the grocery store is quite significant. Now, can you plant your potatoes that have sprouted from the grocery store? Yes, of course you can. And I actually have a full blog post on how to do that safely and effectively. I'll be sure to link that in the description box down below. But when it really comes to me wanting to have a bigger harvest, I go for seed potatoes because these are grown for the specific purpose of being planted. So they're going to be chosen for their varieties that are going to produce really well. And another good thing is that they're certified. So you'll see basically they'll have a tag on them saying where they've been certified through. And what that means is that they're going to be tested to be disease-free. There are certain fungal issues that plague potatoes that can live in your soil for years. So when I'm planting my own potatoes that have sprouted that aren't necessarily certified seed potatoes, I always grow them in containers where if I have an issue, I can go ahead and just throw that soil out and it's not going to affect my raised garden beds. But I feel much more comfortable with these because they've been grown and have been tested to be disease-free. You can usually find them at your nursery, even a lot of times your hardware stores, tractor supply stores, things like that. So you'll usually start seeing these hit the shelves around February and last usually until May. Potatoes are something that you want to get in the ground in early spring as soon as the ground is workable. I'm a bit behind this year, which is why I want to get these in the ground today. It's already the end of April, so it's fine. It's happening today. So there's two really popular ways to plant potatoes. The first way is to simply plant them whole. I have done this 100%. It is the fastest, easiest way to do it. You just pop the whole seed potato into the ground and let it do its thing. The other method is to, several days before you start planting, you take a nice clean knife and you actually cut the potatoes into pieces so that there's a couple of eyes between each section. So each section you want to have at least one good eye. I like to go 1 to 2 if possible. And then you let them sit out in indirect sunlight for a couple of days. These have been a couple of weeks because I'm behind this year, but that's all right. And basically they'll scab over like this and get a nice hard surface on them. So I have absolutely planted both ways. I have planted whole potatoes like this and I've planted cut potatoes like this. Frankly, I have not seen a difference in the yield. However, I also haven't really been paying attention to that specifically. So this year I am going to run a little test myself. I'm going to plant the same variety, both whole and as cut pieces, and see what the yields are. So I'll be sure to post a follow-up video to that once we have some more results. Before you plant your potatoes, it's great to go ahead and get them started so that those little eyes are developing into vines. So it's just going to give you a jump start on the germination of the plant itself. This is actually a process called chitting. Yes, I'm not kidding. It's called chitting, C-H-I-T-T-I-N-G, chitting. And that's the process of basically exposing your seed potatoes to light so that they will start forming these vines. I like to just put them in some indirect sunlight inside, and it doesn't take them long to start sprouting. So now before we get into the actual planting of our potatoes, let's talk a little bit about containers that you can use for potatoes. Potatoes are a really versatile crop, so the determinate varieties especially only need to be planted about 4 inches deep. So raised beds, things like that work really well. Even in-ground planting, obviously you can do that with your indeterminate varieties as well. You're just going to want to make sure you're hilling that soil around them as they grow so that you get those bigger harvests. So in-ground is definitely our first option. That's a very easy way to go, but with potatoes we just want to make sure that we have nice loose soil so that those tubers can form, that it's not too rocky of soil or really heavy clay where it's going to kind of impede those tubers from forming and getting really big as they grow. Now obviously growing tubers and other like thick rooted crops like that can be a really good way to break up clay soil and heavy soils. However, the benefit of that is more for the soil than the actual harvest. So you're probably not going to get really nice formed big potatoes if you're growing them in heavy soils. So you will want to amend that soil and also make sure it's really nutrient rich, adding compost and things like that to it because they are heavy feeders. Another great option are raised beds. So I've got my raised bed here. This is a large one that we built with some urbanite. And then in the last few years, I've actually planted them in these troughs. So really any style of raised bed is going to serve you very well for potatoes, and it makes it a little bit easier when you're harvesting because your soil is already up. It's a little bit easier to dig into that than it is to just dig into the native ground. So it saves my back a little bit of work when I plant them in raised containers like this. I also really love to grow potatoes in containers and pots. These are big nursery pots. So I think we bought, I don't know, trees or something. I hold on to all of these, and this large size is great for potatoes. If you're planting them in pots, you really just want to make sure that you're not overpacking them in so that you're giving them room. So really in here, I would give them 2 to 4 inches in between each other, and just know that you're probably going to have a little bit smaller size potatoes, which are still delicious. But when you're planting in a hard side container like that, a lot of times there's just not as much room for them to form. A great alternative to that are grow bags. So because these are not hard-sided, they're a little bit more flexible and give the plant a little bit more room to form and things like that. So there's lots of different styles of grow bags. This is actually a fun one because it is made for potatoes. I think this is a 15-gallon potato bag. And what's funny is that it actually has this little flap here. So you can open it up. And the idea is that you can reach in and harvest some fingerling potatoes as they're growing or check the development. It works decently well. I can say I've never really heavily utilized this little pocket. Obviously there's only one, so you're only really grabbing them from this one side, and you would have to make sure that the potatoes are actually growing in that one spot. So that's why I say they work decently well, but it is kind of fun and it's a cool little trick to show people when they come over. Other options when it comes to grow bags, there are all shapes, sizes, things like that. There's really tall, deep ones. There's wide, skinny ones. This is a 10-gallon one. That one works very well. This is another potato bag. These all work very well for potatoes, and I really like them personally. So they're easy to move around. Especially if you are trying to grow an indeterminate one and you might have some early frosts, but then you still have nice warm days after that. These do have the handle, so it's nice because you can easily just pick them up and take them in, or put them somewhere covered so that they're out of the frost. Okay, a big storm just went through, so I had to run in for a little bit, but we're back and it's time to get our potatoes planted. So the potatoes I'm planting today are a determinate variety, meaning that they don't need to have the soil continually topped off or have the soil really be hilled around them. They just produce the potatoes at one level underneath the soil. They're not going to produce it basically up the vine. So it makes planting a little bit easier, but I'll kind of talk about how you would plant in both methods, and in the blog post I linked down below about how to plant store-bought sprouted potatoes. Those were an indeterminate variety, so I talked a little bit more about that method in depth down there. So because I want to run my little potato trial here, very unscientific, but I want to see the difference in growth between whole potatoes and the ones I've cut. I'm using the same variety, and I'm going to plant them in these same grow bags, and I'm going to mark it so that we know which is which, and then at the end of the season I'll see which one produced better. So I'm going to show you how to get these planted while I do that. Alright, so I've got my grow bags, I've got my potatoes, and I've got my soil. So this is a garden mixed soil. This is the same soil that I use in my raised beds, and then I mixed it so it's about half and half with compost. Potatoes are a heavy feeder, so mixing in compost will definitely help with the production. So if we were planting indeterminate potatoes, one of the things I would suggest is rolling this bag down actually, because we're only going to fill it probably halfway to begin with, and then as the vines start to grow, we would continue filling it, and you can roll it up at that point. That's not the case with these though, because these are determinate potatoes. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to take our grow bag, and we're going to fill it about halfway with the soil, put the potatoes in, and then fill it the rest of the way. Now, I should also mention that this soil has been pre-dampened thanks to the rainstorm that just came through. But if you don't have that luxury, you can certainly just pre-dampen your soil with a hose or whatever you need to do. But it's nice to go ahead and do that before you put it in the bag. Okay, so we filled our bag about halfway up with soil. So it's about 4 to 6 inches remaining, so we're going to put our potatoes in, and then we'll top it off with that additional soil. So this one is going to be my potatoes that I cut. So I'm going to find some good ones with some really mature eyes already coming off of them, like this one. And we're going to start placing them in. I like to place them with the part that's already vining up. And you just gently set them into the soil. You want to leave about 2 to 3 inches, 2 to 4 inches, something like that, in between each of these little potatoes. All right, so now it's time to go ahead and top it off. We are all planted. It is seriously that easy. I topped it off with just a layer of, these are just some coarse pine shavings. You can use mulch, anything like that. And that's just going to help suppress the weeds until the potatoes grow up through that layer of soil. Once they do, they'll form a really nice green mat, and you won't have a lot of weeds because they'll help suppress that. But until then, it's nice to protect it by topping it with a layer of mulch. And then I added a little plant tag just so I know which ones these are, and so I can keep track of it while I do my little experiment. Well, I got that finished up just in the nick of time. The next rainstorm is just starting to roll through. So I'm going to get these set in a full sun spot out in the garden, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how these grow. But I hope this was super helpful for you. I'll see you all next time. Happy gardening.